The chill of the autumn night settled around me as I hiked deeper into the woods, each step taking me farther from the comfort of the trail. I'd been planning this trip for months, counting down the days until I could escape the constant noise and bustle of the city. There was something about the woods that had always drawn me a peace I couldn't find anywhere else. A place where the only sounds were those of the wind through the trees and the distant call of an owl. The forest was darkening as I walked, the sun dipping low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground. After nearly an hour, I found a small clearing that felt perfect, surrounded by a dense circle of trees. It was secluded, protected, the kind of place that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. I dropped my pack with a relieved sigh, grateful to finally settle in. I pitched my tent, careful to secure it firmly in case of an unexpected wind, and then gathered some kindling for a small fire. It took a few tries, but soon, flames flickered to life, their warmth pushing back the chill that was already creeping into the air. As darkness settled, I pulled out the book one brought and sat close to the fire, letting myself get lost in the story. The crackle of the flames and the rustling of leaves filled the air, and soon, the stress I'd been carrying for weeks began to fade. I don't know how long I'd been reading when I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper that seemed to drift through the trees. I froze, my eyes lifting from the page, listening carefully. At first I thought it was just the wind moving through the branches, but then it came again. This time the sound was clearer, a murmur that seemed almost purposeful. A chill slid down my spine, but I shook it off, telling myself it was nothing. Probably an animal rustling in the underbrush or the echo of my own thoughts. But the whispering persisted, threading through the silence, growing ever so slightly louder with each passing minute. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, something insistent, something almost familiar. I tried to ignore it, returning to my book, but the words blurred on the page. The whispering was getting under my skin, the sound so faint that I couldn't even be sure I was really hearing it. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was no longer alone. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I closed my book and set it down by the fire, rising slowly, scanning the trees with a mix of caution and intrigue. My flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating twisted tree trunks and thick underbrush. With each step I took, the whispers grew louder, guiding me towards something deeper in the woods. My heartbeat quickened, a mixture of excitement and fear building in my chest. The firelight faded behind me as I ventured further into the forest, my flashlight now the only source of light in the encroaching darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. I felt like I was walking into another world, one that existed parallel to the peaceful woods I had known just moments before. The path beneath my feet was barely visible, swallowed up by the shadows. After several minutes, I spotted something unusual through the trees, a dark shape that seemed out of place among the twisted branches and dense undergrowth. I moved closer, my flashlight casting narrow beams across what looked like the remnants of a building, hidden away in the heart of the forest. As I drew near, the shape became clearer, a cabin, old and decrepit, standing alone in a forgotten clearing. The cabin looked like it had been there for decades, maybe even longer. The wood was warped and splintered, patches of moss clinging to the rotting walls. Vines wrapped around the structure, creeping up the sides as if they were trying to pull it back into the earth. Broken windows stared out like hollow eyes, and the door hung open, swinging slightly in the wind with an eerie creak. I took a step closer, my heart pounding as I tried to understand what I was looking at. Who would build a cabin out here, so far from any trail or road? And why hadn't I ever heard mention of it before? I'd studied maps of the area, and there had been no signs of any structures this deep in the woods. The whispers intensified, seeming to wrap around me, coaxing me closer to the cabin. The sound was no longer soft, it was insistent, almost pleading. I felt a strange compulsion to approach, a pull that I couldn't quite explain, as if something was waiting for me inside. Just as I took a step toward the cabin, a shadow moved near the doorway. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat, my flashlight trembling in my hand. There, standing just inside the entrance, was a figure, a dark, indistinct shape barely visible in the dim light. It was tall, motionless, watching me with an intensity that I could feel even from a distance. My heart raced, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure stood perfectly still, blending into the shadows yet unmistakably present. I couldn't make out any features, only the outline of someone or something that seemed to be waiting. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, my eyes locked on the figure. Time seemed to stretch, the silence pressing down on me until it felt like I couldn't breathe. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices echoing through the trees, urging me to come closer. But then the figure shifted. Its head tilted slightly, as if it were studying me, and a chill shot down my spine. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. In an instant, I turned and bolted, adrenaline flooding my veins as I sprinted back toward my campsite. The branches clawed at my arms and legs, the underbrush grabbing at my feet, but I didn't stop. The whispers followed me, echoing through the darkness, filling the air with their urgent, desperate pleas. When I finally reached my campsite, I stumbled into the clearing, gasping for breath. The sight of the campfire, now just glowing embers, brought a small measure of comfort, though the fear still gripped me. I hurriedly packed up my things, my hands shaking as I shoved everything into my backpack. The fire had burned low, casting eerie shadows that flickered across the trees, making them seem like they were closing in around me. I doused the fire, watching as the last embers faded into darkness, leaving me surrounded by a suffocating silence. Slinging my bag over my shoulder, I made my way out of the clearing, not daring to look back at the path that led to the cabin. Every sound seemed amplified: the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant rustle of branches, the faint echo of whispers that still lingered in the air. The journey back to the edge of the forest felt endless, each step weighed down by the feeling that something was watching, following, just beyond the reach of my flashlight. When I finally broke through the tree line and spotted my car, relief washed over me, and I hurried toward it, practically throwing myself inside and locking the doors behind me. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. The forest loomed in the rearview mirror, silent and still, as if it hadn't just been the setting of something terrifying. But as I stared into the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was still out there, hidden among the trees. As I drove away, the night seemed to deepen around me, the trees on either side of the road pressing in like silent watchers. The headlights cut through the darkness, casting long shadows that danced across the pavement, but nothing could ease the tension in my chest. In the rearview mirror, the forest was just a silhouette against the moonlit sky, a dark mass that faded with each passing mile. But even as the trees receded and the open road stretched ahead, the whispers lingered in my mind like echoes that refused to fade. The journey home was uneventful, yet every turn, every dark stretch of road felt heavy, as if something was weighing down on me, hitching a ride back with me from those woods. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something there, a shadowy figure, a fleeting movement, but all I saw was the empty road behind me, swallowed up by the night. Back home, I tried to shake off the experience, but even in the safety of my room, the whispers seemed to linger. Every shadow felt charged, like eyes were on me. Though the sounds faded, I knew I'd brought back a piece of the forest, a reminder that some mysteries are meant to stay hidden. In the days that followed, the feeling of being watched didn't fully disappear. At night, I would catch myself glancing toward dark corners, my heart racing at the faintest sound, half expecting to see that shadowy figure standing there, waiting. The whispers no longer haunted me as they had that night, but they lingered in the back of my mind, a faint echo that reminded me of the secrets I had left behind in the woods. As time passed, I tried to convince myself that it had all been a figment of my imagination, a trick played by the isolation of the forest and the silence of the night. But deep down, I knew that what I had experienced was real. Some places, I realized, hold on to their mysteries, refusing to let them fade, guarding them in the darkness where only the brave or the foolish dare to tread. And sometimes those secrets cling to those who wander too close, following them home like shadows that refuse to fade in the light.